Hello and welcome to episode 69 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. In this episode, we're revisiting the Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly comedy classic, Step Brothers, directed and co-written by Adam McKay. Ferrell and Reilly recently returned to less than enthusiastic audience and critic responses to their new movie, Holmes and Watson, while McKay's new movie, Vice, is garnering Oscar buzz. So we're going back to the golden era of Ferrell and Reilly to see what we think of Step Brothers more than 10 years later.
Step Brothers connected with audiences right away, as the McKay and Ferrell magic worked once again, earning nearly $130 million worldwide. Critics were not quite as taken with it, but as the movie has been even more widely seen and re-seen by fans, it has become one of the most notable and revered comedies of the 21st century.
But does all that reverence mean that Step Brothers is any better than critics first thought?
Or is it so funny that the first time we saw it, we laughed so hard we fell off our dinosaurs? Keep listening.
This is a bad time.
What the hell's going on?
Mom, Mr. Doback. Okay, Dale and I were
Stop
just...
calling me Mr. Doback.
Sorry. Okay, Mom, Doback. We think it would be very prudent.
Can we turn our beds into bunk beds?
Yes.
Why are you guys so sweaty?
All right, we've already figured out how to do this. The beds match up perfectly.
And here's the thing, it'll give us so much extra space in our room to do activities.
Please say yes.
You don't need permission from us to build bunk beds. You're adults. You can do what you want.
So...
I'm not making myself clear. I don't give a fuck. Now, you both have several interviews tomorrow. I would think you'd be focused on that and not building bunk beds.
So we can? No?
Yes. Yes,
Sweet.
you can make fun.
I knew it.
Okay, you guys are not going to regret this. We're going to get so much more activities done.
This is the funnest night ever.
This is so scary.
All right, so that is probably one of the more famous scenes from Step Brothers. There's probably, in that brief clip, there's probably like 7 different lines that people quote.
Mm-hmm. I would think
from
it's
it.
chock full.
It illustrates a little bit the relationship that Brennan and Dale eventually have in the movie.
Yeah, not
a
at
lot
first,
more
but
contentious at the beginning, but it's a good indicator of the type of dynamic that Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly have.
Did you have bunk beds when you were a kid?
Nope.
That scene works because, in a way, it's also very relatable. I remember.
Oh, I loved bunk beds.
Being so excited getting bunk beds. Me and my brother.
Yeah, I always had my own room. My sister and I had our own room, so we didn't have bunk beds. But I was always pretty jazzed whenever
Stay at a friend's house who had bunk beds or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and then you always fight over who gets the top bunk.
Yeah, I actually never quite got that. I don't know why. Why you would fight over that? I don't know.
Because
I just like the whole experience.
The rest of your life you're going to be sleeping at bed level. This is something different. This is elevated.
I always liked though having like the bed over me. Like I liked the experience of sort of like the covering.
Well, it was cool because you could just drape stuff over the top bunk, and you got a fort.
Yep,
right there.
Yep. Anyway, so that's Brennan and Dale getting excited about their bunk bed, which is understandable for children, but part of the humor of the movie is that these are 40-year-old men. Still living with their parents who got married late in life, and it's funny to see grown men act like children.
Yeah. So this movie's, is it 10 years old this year? Is that what it was? Yeah.
It was 10 years old in 2018.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this movie is at least 10 years old.
10 and a half.
And a lot's happened since then, I think, even just with comedy, but also with all the people involved in the movie. I will tell you, I was surprised at the lackluster response to Holmes and Watson. We were actually pretty excited about it back when we talked about it in
the trailers had funny stuff, but maybe that's all that's funny in it.
I guess.
Maybe I'd like it. Maybe I need to stop paying so much attention to people's responses to it.
That's true. Although I have a younger brother who saw it, said he fell asleep and that it was terrible.
Oh, no.
And he is, if he had no reason not to like it. Huge Will Ferrell fan. Liked a lot of the same movies I liked growing up and the comedy I liked. So.
No, it's too bad.
Yeah. It's not the end all be all. I'll still maybe catch it at some point. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe.
but that just shows that's where we're at.
Yeah.
If I get around to it, I'll see it. Whereas, man, when Step Brothers came out, there was no question I was going to be in the theater seeing that movie.
Yeah.
But I haven't been that excited about a Will Ferrell movie in a while. I don't know where it stopped. I think I saw, you remember the movie The Campaign? It was Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis, and I thought that was like you couldn't lose with that.
Right.
And then you did lose.
Oh,
like
no.
that movie was just not that great. And I think ever since then, that came out just a little after Step Brothers, and I think after that, my interest, Will Ferrell alone was not going to sell the movie.
Well, I mean, I love Will Ferrell.
Yes.
And I think people our age will always love Will Ferrell. But he hasn't really changed. He hasn't evolved with comedy, I don't think. He's still doing very character-driven stuff. And
well, I think in what's telling of that is he's still doing Ron Burgundy.
You mean like out and about? He's still doing Ron Burgundy? Yeah, he did it recently, right?
Yeah, I was, so Conan O'Brien actually has a new podcast called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend.
We're not gonna advertise other podcasts on our podcast without.
No, what I'm saying is, where can we still be friends? Conan O'Brien needs a friend. I'm saying, should we get him on here?
That's right. He's probably reaching out indirectly.
I think that's what's happening is he knows about our podcast.
Yeah.
He's too shy to come out and say, I want to be on your podcast.
Right.
So the way he goes about it in his mind, I'll create my
if you guys are this friend-based podcast,
That's the only reason I brought up the title of the podcast.
Right,
the only reason.
Yeah.
But Will Ferrell was on it, and I was listening to it, and they were talking about how he had recently done Ron Burgundy at a charity. Now, here's the thing. They were kind of talking about his bit he did, and it was still really funny. Like, Will Ferrell is still a funny, like, he's still a funny dude. Like, in that interview, he's really funny, too. And Conan O'Brien talks about how whenever anybody asks him, even today, who cracks you up the most, he doesn't even skip a beat, and he says Will Ferrell. Mm-hmm. And that hasn't changed.
Will Ferrell on late night shows,
appearances,
award shows, presenting, everything. He's still very funny. But I don't want to speak ill of him, but it's just sort of more of the same.
It's how many different ways can you kind of implant this same character into different scenarios before it just, the very premise of it starts to get a little tiring.
Right. And for somebody who kind of set the pace of comedy for a while, has not been able to keep up with where comedy's going, which maybe we'll get to that. Where is comedy?
Where is it? Yeah. Good point. We need to get to that.
Yeah.
Let's maybe back it up a little bit.
Okay.
Let's just talk about first viewings, I guess.
I didn't see Step Brothers until, honestly, a couple years after it came out.
Really? And you told me you had never seen Talladega Nights.
Right.
I think... What happened?
Well... So, for some reason, I didn't see Step Brothers when it was in theaters. I saw The Hangover in theaters before I saw Step Brothers, and I didn't really like The Hangover.
Yeah.
And I think I just had generally, at that point in my life, been sort of already fatigued by the Apatow, Ferrell, I guess Zach Galifianakis, even though he hadn't really done enough to be like tired of at that point. I remember everybody in the theater just dying watching The Hangover. And I was like, this is fine. I wasn't even really aware of it. It's not like I was saying this stuff is tired or this is all kind of being the same thing. I just never felt the urgency to see Step Brothers in theater. I didn't go when my friends saw it. And I was like, I'll get to it.
Yeah.
So I ended up watching it. And I think I watched it on my own. And I thought it was funny. But honestly, at that point, it had already been like kind of quoted and everybody had sort of like...
Yeah.
So I liked it. I should have done a little bit more reflecting because I can't identify, because I loved Anchorman, but that was like 4 years before Step Brothers. And maybe what it was I was way more into The Office at that point, British and American, The Colbert Report. That was sort of more like my comedy stuff.
Okay.
And I think you could make an argument that those are offshoots of Will Ferrell's thing. A character like Michael Scott or Stephen Colbert in these situations, but in situations that felt way riskier and way more progressive as far as comedy goes.
Now that you mention it, those characters are similar to Ron Burgundy. I mean, there's still someone who thinks they're the expert on everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's true with Ricky Bobby. That's true with the brothers and Step Brothers. Like, they think they're pretty... Like
I know. I'm talking about more like The Office and
right.
like Steve Carell in The Office.
So I'm
Colbert.
Saying like that concept had that sort of egotist. Like, I felt, I guess unconsciously, because I had never really put words to it until now, that was doing something way better. I had already gotten into Edgar Wright at that point, especially Edgar Wright's control over a movie versus Adam McKay's control over a movie. Yeah. It just felt like I didn't need Step Brothers. So I saw it and I liked it well enough. I think it surprised me that I liked it as much as I did, but I was never part of the zeitgeist moment of Step Brothers, which is probably a little bit too bad. I liked it enough to put it at 4 stars on Letterboxd for whatever that's worth. But yeah, okay. I definitely did not have the typical Step Brothers experience for people our age. What about you?
Yeah, so I saw it when it came out in the theater, just me and Andrea, my wife. And we both liked it a lot. You know, I was such an Anchorman fan. I was a huge fan of Ferrell when he was on SNL. I think that was like, you know, they always say with SNL that whatever you grew up with, kind of when you went to high school and maybe those first few years of college, that's going to be what you think is the best SNL years. And for me, that was Ferrell.
Yep.
And so I loved Will Ferrell. I even got into movies like Night at the Roxbury and you know, like movies that no one else even watches, but Will Ferrell was in it and I loved it, you know? And then I thought Anchorman was just like, it just blew me away.
Anchorman was amazing.
Yeah. And then Talladega Nights came out and I loved that just as much. Not everybody did. I did. And to me, that was because John C. Reilly was such a revelation in that movie. I couldn't believe how funny he was to actually go toe to toe with Will Ferrell. Mm-hmm. And then so when I saw that Step Brothers was coming out and it was the two of them again, and the trailer looked funny.
Yeah.
So I was just like, yeah, and it's Adam McKay, and I'm like, sign me up, I'm there, you know. And so I went, and I got exactly what I wanted out of it. So it was funny. It didn't disappoint on that level, and I didn't actually think about it much deeper than that. With that said, those are the 3 Will Ferrell comedy movies that immediately come to mind when you ask me to list Will Ferrell comedies.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Elf, but we talked about Elf before.
Yeah, we did.
But, you know, Anchorman, Talladega Nights, Step Brothers. That's the 3 I'm going to list. And the other ones are going to be like, oh, yeah, I kind of remember Blades of Glory. Kind of remember The Campaign. Like, they start to kind of semi-pro. You know, they start to kind of... They start to kind of slip off my mind, but those 3 always, they were kind of like the trifecta, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it sort of stayed at 4, and that's what I have it at my Letterboxd. And I had never really watched it again entirely, but it just seemed like I had seen it in patchwork over the years quite a few times. You know, I'd see it on TV once in a while, hear it quoted all over the place, and you know, never actually sat down and watched it again until now.
Yeah, I had never rewatched it until last night, actually. So how did it fare for you?
I don't know how to apply ratings to this. Here's what I'm going to say. Okay, I'm going to give it a 3. Mm-hmm. It is still extremely funny.
Yes.
In parts. Mm-hmm. And in quite a few parts.
Yep.
But this time around as a movie, I was rather disappointed. And we'll get into what I mean by that, because I know that's really vague.
Yeah.
It was weird. I was laughing a lot.
Yeah.
But at the same time in my mind, I'm like, but this just isn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to really explain what was happening mentally in that way. Like how that can even be. It almost seems like it can't exist. How can you take a comedy that you're laughing at crazy? Like I'm laughing a lot in this movie and still be like, but it wasn't that great of a movie. And I'm going to say that it's not that great of a movie.
Yeah.
And even when I put it against the other 2 I mentioned, I would still hold, which I have seen those a couple times on repeat. Those still hold up way better, I think, than Step Brothers does. I'd love to talk about why, but that's my feelings. But let's hear your feelings. And I don't, you know, maybe they're way different.
No, it's not that different. I'm with you. When this movie is funny, it's
magical.
Yeah, it's unreal how funny it is. But I was with you. It's a weird feeling. And I don't need something to be more than funny necessarily. But like, I guess it felt more like it knows what's funny. And so it's doing what's funny rather than actually like being funny.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe the best word I can come up for it was with what you're saying is it felt a little more formulaic to me.
Yeah.
And in that sense, like the formula works.
Yep.
So it's funny. But when you know the formula, it doesn't feel like it has that energy that something like Talladega Nights or Anchorman has, where you feel like they were kind of stumbling and figuring it out as they went. Like they were almost like, oh, this works.
Right.
This is a great formula.
Yeah.
And you could feel that on the screen. Whereas I felt like then it was like, we can take that and do it again, right? Can't we? Yeah, let's make a lot of money.
I actually watched Talladega Nights last night after I watched Step Brothers, and I don't know, maybe that was the wrong way to do it or something, but I actually thought Step Brothers was funnier. Talladega Nights just wasn't really connecting with me. This sucks because it's like there could be a lot of reasons why this stuff's not funny. Like I'm older now. Am I just crankier? Am I just like less given to hilarity?
Well, I can attest that you have a sense of humor. I mean, but I do think that our comedy preferences and tastes do change.
Yeah.
Do I need goofiness that's like saying something? Is that what it is? Like I can't just have,
so.
I don't know.
I think so because honestly, I saw the movie Game Night a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I didn't like that movie that much though.
I thought it was really funny.
Yeah.
I really did like it. A little bit like, taking Edgar Wright's formula and applying it maybe to a David Fincher movie. But like, I thought when it was funny, I thought it was really funny. And I thought it was refreshing in a lot of its comedy, that it wasn't looking to just tread territory other people had. So I was pleased to know that I could watch a modern comedy, and laugh at it. That isn't some like subversive sort of like, I'm not just laughing knowingly. Like I thought it was a really funny movie. But that movie, which 10 years ago probably would have been one of the biggest box offers, that style of movie, that
Game Night.
Yeah. Just made no splash at all.
Right.
Like most people haven't really heard of it. And I still like Edgar Wright's comedy. I still find things funny. Which, oh my gosh, this sounds so like robotic.
I've been known to chuckle every now and then.
Yeah.
I do think that if you watched Step Brothers and then you watched almost immediately right after that Talladega Nights,
which I did,
I don't think I would like Talladega Nights either.
So I did it wrong. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying. I'm
saying that I am admitting that I did it wrong. I understand that.
Okay, I didn't know it, but because Talladega Nights was different than Anchorman, and felt fresh at the time when I saw it. And again, we need to get into eventually. I think that movie is doing things that are more interesting than what Step Brothers ultimately is doing.
Okay, and I mean, if I'm honest, at the end of Step Brothers, I had a little bit of fatigue from the comedy. Like, I just told you it didn't really stick with me, and then I watched another comedy
just like it,
just because I hadn't seen it.
And that's the thing too, is when I was watching Step Brothers, I was just growing weary of it by the end.
Yeah.
And it's not even that long of a movie.
No, it's not. But I will say it kind of brings it back better than a lot of comedies. Like, there are a lot of comedies that have concepts that work like gangbusters for the first half hour, and then they realize they have to keep writing. Yeah. And there's a little bit of that with Step Brothers, but I think it ends up being able to breathe new life into it. But I think it owes a lot to 40-Year-Old Virgin. And following Apatow's sort of like, in the third act, we're just going to do some crazy stuff.
Right. But it does work. I would say the Bocelli singing scene is very funny.
Great.
Boats and hoe.
It's very
really
funny.
is.
And by then I had kind of turned on the movie, and it almost won me back.
And it even does something new with Adam Scott's character, which
God.
This time, and I think it was true the first time I saw it, Adam Scott is a really vital part of this.
Yes.
And then the fact that they do something different with him by the end is right timing. Like, clearly they knew what they were doing when they wrote that movie and everything, and that character. So I guess we should probably be a little bit more structured in how we do this. What works?
I can tell you some. I can tell you some of my favorite. To me, you just mentioned it. Adam Scott and Kathryn Hahn are the best in this movie, and that family. I mean, that whole dynamic in the movie is so funny.
I love that acapella scene.
Oh God, the Sweet Child of Mine acapella scene is everything about it.
All right, gang, let's really nail it this time. Here we go. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. Bum.
She's got a smile that it seems to me reminds me of childhood memories, where everything was as fresh as a bright blue sky.
All right, Tommy, you're the oldest. I'm counting on you. Come on.
She's got eyes of the bluest skies, as if they thought of rain. I hate to look into those eyes and see it now.
Nice vibrato, buddy. All right, Alice, let's go.
Reminds me of a warm, safe
Flat.
place.
It's so flat. I don't even know. You don't even look good while you're singing. The worst thing I've ever heard. This is $1,200 a week for voice lessons, and this is what I get? Okay, I'm going to save it with the solo.
The face of the boy.
Yes. That's great.
And
That's
the
great.
song choice. That scene is the perfect introduction to this family.
Yep.
And I don't think it ever really lets up as far as every time that family dynamic comes into the movie. Those are some of my favorite scenes. And I love Kathryn Hahn in this movie. I think that she steals every single scene she's in. She's not even given that much, but what she does with it is amazing.
She is proven to be just a killer comedian. And every time she's in a movie, she steals the scenes she's in.
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm Derek's wife.
Hi.
Is it true that you struck Derek in the face and he fell from the treehouse?
Yeah, he asked me to.
Oh, it's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. I want you to know that tonight I am going to pleasure myself to the image of you doing that to Derek. You know what I mean? Masturbating. I am. Oh, Dale. You're something. You are something.
Just a few weeks ago, I watched her in a more dramatic role in Private Life. Did you see that movie?
No, I didn't. I want to.
It's her and Paul Giamatti, and there's some comedy in it, but it's definitely more of a dramatic role. And you know, she's incredible. I just think she's an incredible actress. I love her.
She's got an energy that like you don't see.
You don't expect
many.
it. Yeah.
You don't expect it, but very few people bring the type of energy that she brings.
It's interesting because she co-stars in Private Life. Like Molly Shannon has a role in that, and it reminds me a little bit of what Molly Shannon would do, where you're seeing this actress who takes a very awkward character and just ramps it up to 11 anyways, and just makes you squirm so much when you're watching it.
Yeah.
Every little tick, every little piece in that performance is adding to the comedy, and I love it.
It's really uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. It's the whole point, but it's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and Kathryn Hahn and Adam Scott are really great additions to the formula. I mean, we can't... Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly are great. They're amazing, right? Like, I don't know if anybody can play the man-child like they do. Will Ferrell being like a sulking like teenager, and John C. Reilly being like an overbearing sort of bully teenager. And there are definitely times throughout the movie that it is as funny as it was the first time anybody saw it, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you take a picture? It'll last longer.
Why don't you stop being so confrontational, Dale?
I'm not the one staring at me.
So, Brennan, how about you? I know you used to work at PetSmart, right?
That's right, Mr. Doback.
Call me Robert.
That's right, Robin.
Robert.
Actually, Brennan is a really talented person. He's a very gifted singer.
I'm really, really good.
How good?
I've been called the songbird of my generation by people who've heard me. That good.
My wife doesn't usually watch the movies with me. She was just in the room, and there are parts that she was laughing really hard at, and that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And she wasn't even paying that much attention to the movie, and so that says something. That's And then what I noticed, how I knew I was getting weary of it, was later in the movie, I was just not laughing at the stuff as much, and she had left the room for a while, and she came back and was like ironing something, and then they said something, and she laughed hysterically. And I was like, I was tired of it.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm like, it does show that, yes, they know what they're doing. When you put John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell together and you have them riff with each other, it's going to be funny. Is it funny for 90 minutes? If the script can throw a few curveballs in there and make them do it differently, then sure.
Yeah,
if it's just another stock scene, I think there's like a scene later on where they fight too.
Yeah.
And
That's
I just
me
was,
too.
and when by the time they're fighting a second time, and I mean like physical fighting.
Yeah.
I'm like, enough already.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to see this,
Yep.
you know?
I think that was the exact moment that I wrote in my notes. Like, the movie's kind of spinning its wheels.
Yeah.
They just didn't go enough places to really sustain it for me.
Yeah. there are parts in this movie where I find myself, surprisingly laughing at things like where I wouldn't even think I would normally laugh at. Like, for instance, being at a job interview and having John C. Reilly fart. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a part that
I laughed
at this
at that
age,
too.
I'm like, I don't know why I'm laughing at that, but it's done in a way it's hard not to laugh at.
Yeah.
So let's do this. You guys are hired. You're in, unless you're like the weirdest guys ever and I don't see it.
Great.
Was that a fart?
I don't know.
I can taste it.
I mean, that is entirely John C. Reilly. The part of that joke that makes it not that funny for me is Seth Rogen's ad-libbing. It felt so clear that Seth Rogen, who is an unbelievable improviser, was just making stuff up. And just the fart in and of itself is hilarious. And John C. Reilly's face, I mean, everything.
And another, since we're talking about good things about the movie, I do think if you were just to listen to what we're talking about, you could think that the other aspects of the movie were just done really sloppily because they just put them in a room and had them do their thing. But there is sort of even in production design, there's an attention to detail. I notice, if you look on the nightstand, it's always like Mountain Dew and Doritos, which is like, of course it is. Their wardrobe, what they're wearing, things like calling your room the Beat Laboratory and
Kelsey,
having them be into drums and
Kelsey noticed, which I didn't notice, but when the walls of the Beat Laboratory, he started painting them black and then they're not finished.
So there's a little attention to detail here.
Yeah,
that's worth acknowledging.
Definitely,
and that detail also I think comes through even in the secondary characters, like in Adam Scott's character, like his company's called like D-Man Realty.
Yeah, nice baby.
Yeah, and the amount of times they bring up Vanilla Ice.
Yeah.
And the people that he mentions that just show how much of a douche he is. Like when they're like, Dane Cook, pay-per-view, and like hanging out with Mark Cuban.
Right, and Daughtry.
And then when he's showing the house because he's gonna sell it, and he's bringing the black family in, and he's like, when I'm hanging with my homeboys,
right?
That really
this is just how I talk.
Those little touches are where I'm like, there are moments in this movie that do make it a cut above it, where it does seem like it's not just, hey, let's get these guys in a room and riff,
Yeah, and you're right. If you're, it sounds like that's all we think of it. For a long time, it's really good at that, but then it's what happens to a lot of comedies. It just kind of doesn't know what to do for a while. It knows how it wants to start. It knows how it wants to end. And it doesn't really know what to do in between there. Yeah. And so in this movie, they end up doing the first act over again.
Now, I think that it's not surprising to me that the movie has had a life to it because of how it is quotable. I think it's very quotable. I mean, it's got a life to it in that sense, but I don't know how much of a legacy it really deserves, because that's kind of what it is. It is meant to be a movie that you walk into a room in and, I like this part. This is real funny. And I don't need to watch the whole movie. I love the bunk bed scene. I'm good. You know.
I kind of dreaded talking about this movie because I was like, it's tough to talk about comedy when you're not into it. Like generally,
explain why.
Yeah. And then to have to talk about what is working ends up devaluing it. I don't know. It's just one of those things that like, can a comedy survive its fame? Its ubiquity. Because the more you dissect comedy, the less funny it gets. The more you repeat it, the less funny it gets. And so the best thing that a comedy can do is connect with people and become a part of the vocabulary and everything. But then once it does, it stops being funny.
So you can acknowledge it's funny and still talk about the movie and its place in comedy.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe it's okay just to say, Step Brothers, hey, it's a funny movie.
It is.
It's not one of the greats. I don't think. Because I think when it comes to comedy, to make it one of the greats, it's got to be doing something that at the time feels super fresh, super new. Because actually, a comedy that's not that different in premise and in characters than Step Brothers is Dumb and Dumber.
Right.
But I would put Dumb and Dumber way up higher in the rankings
I would too.
as far as all-time great comedies.
I would too.
Than Step Brothers. Well, why is that? Is it because Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels are that much better with each other than Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly? Not really. But is that movie doing anything as far as like, deeper themes or ideas
No.
than what Step Brothers is doing? Not really either.
Not at all.
But that movie at the time, so fresh.
Yeah.
And so influential.
Yeah.
How influential is Step Brothers? It's influential in the sense of like, okay, John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell are great together.
Yeah. And
we have already seen what Adam McKay can do. Like that, I would put like, Dumb and Dumber and Anchorman. Like these are movies that, and there was right up there with like The Jerk.
Yep.
And,
Sure.
Steve Martin would go on to do other comedies, but
Right.
The Jerk is The Jerk,
Yeah.
and it's because of when they come out and what they do in their time.
Yeah.
And Step Brothers is just what it did in its time this is like a good, solid comedy that, is fine.
Yeah.
And so for the purposes of this podcast, where
Sure.
we're trying to evaluate where does this movie kind of live as far as, this is what we do. We rewatch movies to kind of 10 years later say, how does this hold up? You know, I think it's perfectly fine to say this is a movie that is still very funny. Probably doesn't deserve to be considered one of the greats, I don't think. Because it's not doing anything when you really look at it. It's not doing anything all that original. And it's not even doing anything that had already been done better.
Right.
Like, I think what made Talladega Nights great, one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of them was it was the first time I saw John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell together.
Yeah.
And that was such a new thing to see someone who could actually hold the screen that long with Will Ferrell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who wasn't even known as a comedian before that, really.
Right.
I was amazed by that,
Yeah, it's not even one of those movies that if you've seen what came after it, like you've got those influencers that were super fresh at the time, but then once people did stuff that it did, then it seems less fresh. But if you had seen it then, it would have been different. I don't even think that's the case with this because it was just sort of a string of those comedies and the formula hadn't switched that much. I think even the things about it that are working well, I thought the scene at the end where Will Ferrell's singing and they're doing sort of like different fantasy things, I kind of, when I was watching it, I'm like, oh, this is Step Brothers' legacy and its contribution to comedy. And I was like, no, wait, 40-Year-Old Virgin did this.
Yeah, right.
And it maybe didn't go so far with like the different fantasy elements of it, but like it definitely was doing that. And so for that reason, I would kind of place 40-Year-Old Virgin as one of those like
I think so too. Yeah.
Great comedies.
Yeah, that's where you really saw, at least if you hadn't been watching Freaks and Geeks, you saw Judd Apatow's contribution to this, to this whole conversation of comedy.
Right.
But have we kind of talked enough about what we like about the movie?
It was in there somewhere.
So I had to kind of think about what is it about this movie that made me just feel so blah about it, even though I laughed.
Right.
And this is the best I can come up with, is as much as I love John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell working together, part of what I think I tired of and what isn't in Talladega Nights is I think their characters are just the same character.
Mm-hmm.
They're not different enough.
Yeah.
So even when they're improving with each other, they're improving the same character at each other.
Yeah.
And you take a movie like Anchorman and the ensemble that's there, and there's just as much improv going on there, but they have a character to channel, and they're not going to say something that doesn't fit that character.
Yeah.
And I feel like in Step Brothers, it's just the same. I mean,
there's
what's the
arguably a
differences?
different dynamic. Dale is definitely more assertive. Like he's the one who sets the ground rules. It's his house, you know, like, and he has more of like a overbearing personality, but then Will Ferrell sort of in his own way also has that, like with his mom, and like, it just doesn't have it towards him. And then the scene where they're talking to each other in the bed, that's where they become pretty much the same person.
You better not go to sleep. As soon as your eyes shut, I'm gonna punch you square in the face. I hope you stay still when you sleep, because I'm putting a rat trap between your legs. I'm gonna take a pillowcase and fill it full of bars of soap and beat the shit out of you. I want you out of my fucking house. No way, Kimosabe. This is my house now.
Right. And to me, okay, so I'm calling that, and it's something you see a lot in the Apatow McKay thing, sort of that Mad Lib style improv script.
Yes. Yeah.
You take an idea, fill in the right words, and we're just going to do that a couple times, and we're going to cut out the best pieces.
Yep.
And that's when especially you don't have a variety of types of characters, that just, it becomes so evident what it is.
Yep.
I feel like right now, me and you could do this. Like when he says something like, I'm going to roundhouse your ass.
Right.
I could say something that it's funny because it's so specific. Like I'm going to, I'm just looking all around the room here. Like, I'm going to balderdash your light switch. And then that's
ramp it up.
That's the bit. You wrap it up.
You take the 5 funniest or the 5 most random.
You kind of dig into your subconscious and you pull out some specifics and you throw that in, and you do that a couple times, and you're going to find some funny bits. And, that's the formula. Yeah. That's the gig. Yeah. But, when it's two people who are very good at that, but they're playing essentially the same character, and it's a man-child, they're both egotistical,
right,
and think the other person is stepping on them,
and
they have about the same level of intellect, that's all you get.
In
Anchorman, you've got like Ron Burgundy's character playing off of Steve Carell's character, very different,
right, exactly,
with Paul Rudd's character, and then you've got David Koechner thrown into the mix playing this like weird cowboy like champ character.
Right.
And when they channel those characters, you get comedy gold because it's like that character playing off of this character. That's funny. And then even with John C. Reilly and Will Ferrell, I think what I like more about Talladega Nights is they're different characters.
Yeah.
The Ricky Bobby character is that Step Brothers, like narcissistic, arrogant idiot.
Yeah.
But John C. Reilly's character is kind of a lot more pathetic. Like he's a doting, pathetic kind of partner fan.
Constantly asking if he can win one.
Yeah.
Like being like, okay.
Yeah. And that's funny. Like that playing off each other is funny to me. So
I think that's really accurate. Those scenes become tedious because it ends up being them sort of workshopping the same character more than actually doing something with each character.
Yeah.
And I also think just the more we watch those McKay comedies and the Judd Apatow ones, it just becomes way more apparent when they're doing that riffing. I think just that style of comedy is not easy to do, but it's easy to do. Like it's easy to fall back on. And so
it's easy to produce, I think.
It's easy to produce, exactly.
People work their entire lives to get good at that.
Yeah.
But then once they're good at that, it's easy to produce a movie and say, here's a loose script. You're good at it. You're good at it. You're good at it. Let's get you together and let's
get everybody in the room and we'll edit it later.
So there's no question that we're saying there takes talent to do that.
Absolutely. It takes talent to be great at it. But that has been the basis for like every comedy podcast since Comedy Bang Bang. So we hear it constantly there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Apatow did it to the point that he's no longer really doing it.
Yeah. You think McKay kind of got tired of it too?
But you saw other people do it way more poorly. And then these movies became, what new scenario can we put improvisers in to do this? For me, I've seen a lot of like blooper reels or behind the scenes things. And like I saw Zach and Miri and it was not good. But I saw like an outtake of Zach and Miri where Seth Rogen just went like he came up with a new line for like 5 minutes without stopping, and it was just amazing to watch him do that.
Yeah.
And then like they cut stuff out and they edited it, and I remember like, oh, those were the ones they kept. I'm like, it's just not that funny, but it's still amazing to watch them do it.
Yeah.
And I think they're all finding the limitations of it. Like none of them are really doing that anymore. But it seems like Will Ferrell kind of is.
Well, it's got to be hard when you know that's your gift, and it's the thing for a while, and you're great at it. And when it starts to kind of become not the thing anymore, it's got to be hard to say, now I got to figure out something else I'm great at, to stay in the game. Yeah. And I actually think Will Ferrell's, even in his more dramatic roles, he's a good actor. He's not, he can do it.
Yeah.
But my feeling is he probably just has a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah. I'm not going to fault at all.
Sure. And I feel like comedy's a little lost right now, but I think we're going to see a pendulum swing to more scripted comedy.
I think so too. Now, I know I beat the Edgar Wright drum.
I know, but that's the first name that comes to my mind too. I think he resurrected it a bit.
Very tightly scripted.
Yeah. But so are like the Coen brothers.
Yep.
And they do great comedy that really lasts.
Yes,
you know?
I think so too. Even their darker stuff is funnier the more you watch it. Well, I was thinking about that too, because for one thing, it's almost like all comedy now is niche comedy because you can get it everywhere. YouTube, podcasts, Netflix specials, Comedy Central still. It's a tough time for comedy, I think. It's a tough time for comedy because it's just a dark time. Nobody feels good.
Well, there's that, yeah.
And a lot of comedy, it's really dark, like a lot of stuff, a lot of comedy. Because if it's shows like Search Party or a lot of like the Duplass stuff was considered comedies or Girls, it's this very... Isn't it funny how much we all want to die? Like sort of like, and I don't always have a stomach for just being super dark and not really having a joke. Like there's some comedy to that, but it's all super just like
oppressive.
Yeah.
Oppressively dark.
And that's one sort of vein of comedy that's popular now.
Yeah.
And then the other like mainstream of comedy is John Oliver, Stephen Colbert, Hassan Minhaj. Very political comedy.
Yeah, and I would not quite the same, but what I think is right now some of the best comedy that still does improv is Veep. That is sort of explicitly political.
Yeah,
and through comedy bringing certain things to light, but they're all dark.
Right.
They're all things that, you know.
You've got one of the most highly regarded stand-up specials of last year was Hannah Gadsby's Nanette, and there are jokes, and she's a good writer, but it was also as much TED Talk as it was comedy.
Right. Well, I think that just, you know, all that goes to show that, yeah, comedy's in a place where we're really almost, we're dissecting it, just trying to figure out where should we be, you know?
Yeah. Well, and this is another reason that Step Brothers that Step Brothers wore on me was just the idea for a while there in comedy, talking about masturbating was really funny to people. And I will admit that it was to me. Like I thought it was funny back then. My wife has never had any patience for it, and so that kind of once like we started like watching comedies together, that shifted my perspective on it because I'm like, yeah, why would that be funny to everybody, to women? And then Louis C.K. stuff came to light, and so like the amount of like masturbating jokes in Step Brothers hasn't aged well. And now you've also got people who people thought were funny, Louis C.K., prime example, trying to do the thing they've always done, and people are like, that's not funny anymore.
Yeah.
And they're just getting angry about it, not saying, I think you're right, or I get it, or yeah, I've been doing this for a while and I need to progress. I just don't know. I don't know who the progressive comedians are. I don't know who's pushing the envelope. And I also kind of fear anybody who's pushing the comedic envelope, you know?
Well, we're used to pushing the envelope by definition. I think we grew up with pushing the envelope was being more vulgar.
Right.
And I think we've gotten about as vulgar. Well, who knows? You can always surprise me.
No, it's possible.
But we might have just gotten to where nothing's going to shock us anymore.
So,
and I think every generation maybe thinks that's true, and so maybe I'm just speaking of my generation.
Maybe.
But I just feel like what could you possibly say now that would be taboo to me?
Well, I think that's what's happening with
So you got to be smarter. That's
what's happening with the super dark comedy.
Yeah,
like existential comedy. Just everything's depressing and dark, and everything's terrible, and nothing means anything. Isn't that hilarious? That might be where the edginess is trying to come in. But racial humor isn't. There's no stomach for that anymore, and I'm not. That's fine. I do not think. I don't think it's funny to be racist or to push the envelope or like. But like,
I don't want to get to where we're saying that none of the comedy happening right now is good.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I think we're almost getting into that territory where it's like, well, we don't like this stuff's just too dark for us because it just becomes a burden. But you know, I just at the same time, I mean, you know, I think like some of the latest Chappelle specials still talk about race and do it in a very interesting way and ways that make you rethink it and where you watch it and you're like, this is comedy. Comedy is where you're laughing. You're kind of not sure if you should be laughing, but this guy's kind of telling you it's okay. And it's okay because he's bringing things to light that you never thought about before.
Yeah.
You know,
if there are people who I think are moving comedy in better directions, it's people like Chelsea Peretti, Megan Amram, who writes for,
we didn't even talk about the Good Place. That's great comedy.
That is
happening
great.
right now.
I agree.
You know, it's not just saying how much life sucks
No.
and how oppressive life is.
And it's in there, like the philosophy gets there.
Doesn't
but
shirk it, I guess.
Right.
But, yeah.
But no. So like, Megan Amram and Joe Mandy, who write for The Good Place, they're people who I always look to for like solid comedy. But even, like somebody like Jordan Peele. Key and Peele was the funniest thing for a bit. He's
gone
kind
to
of
horror.
off comedy.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think we're all sorting out what we're comfortable with. I think we're all realizing it was kind of gross of us to laugh at what we laughed at for a while. And what's funny? I think it's absolutely fine that we question the power dynamics of comedy and the things that were forced to be funny. When you look at it, it's like, okay, Louis C.K. talked about masturbating constantly, and everybody was laughing, and then the stuff came out. I thought it was interesting a couple of weeks ago, that video of him saying the N-word was like making the rounds. And I saw a headline that said like, video surfaces of Louis C.K. using the N-word. I'm like, that was an HBO show. That video didn't surface. Like this wasn't like the Access Hollywood tape. This was a video we all had access to, and I had watched when it came out. Like, that's on us. That's not on Louis C.K.
Right.
We didn't suddenly find out something he was hiding. That was something that we were celebrating about him.
Well, and I think what happens is, we're asking these questions on this podcast of like, what even is funny anymore? Where's comedy going? And, what some people will react to when they hear us say that, or when they hear people on Twitter say that or whatever, is we're just going to become humorless because we're all so concerned about what we can and can't say and what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that's okay for a while. That's okay for a little bit. Let's just sit there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's sit there and let's say, hey, you got to be better. Not anyone can be a comedian.
Yep.
We're going to laugh again.
I guess so to bring it back to Will Ferrell, the comedians who have established their careers are going to have to change.
Yeah.
And what I see happening more often, like Jerry Seinfeld, who doesn't play colleges now because they're too PC, like they're just getting cranky and saying like, well, now I can't say anything. Do something new then. Like change something.
Yeah.
What I think is unfortunate about the culture, which is labeled as too PC, is that there isn't any room
for growth,
for making that mistake.
And grace. Yeah. And this has been talked about in both Cars and Comedians and Cars Getting Coffee. And I also recently heard it. I can't remember the podcast. It might have been Conan's podcast. Yeah, they don't do colleges. They don't do certain places because they feel like they can't work stuff out.
Yeah.
Well, who was this? Because they were talking about how Chappelle doesn't even allow cell phones. Like, you got to put them in locked boxes. And the point of that being that, there's been a history in stand-up especially where you work out your material in front of an audience and you find out where that line is.
Yeah.
And that there's sort of before you get your HBO special, you've worked this out in front of a lot of different audiences so that you don't know, you can't figure out where the line is until you've crossed it, is basically what they were trying to argue.
And you need that space where you can cross the line and say like, okay, now I know.
Yes. Yeah.
And
there is a truth to us not really allowing that anymore.
Right.
Because it gets recorded, it gets thrown out there, and then that becomes who you are.
There's a scale of like where people associate your beliefs with your work. Usually like novels, they've got the most grace. That a novelist can write a ton of stuff and people aren't going to say, well, the novelist thinks this way. I think comedy is probably where it's at its most closely associated.
Yeah, that's true.
And the truth is, comedians, they have a sense of comedy. Just like a musician has an ear for music, just as anybody has a sense of their craft. Comedians, as much as their comedy is a testament to their sense of humor, their ability to be successful is more a testament to their ability to predict what people think is funny. And it's always interesting to me. One of the most interesting things about comedians in cars getting coffee is what makes each other laugh, what makes the two comedians laugh. Because what makes a comedian laugh can be very different from what they actually produce on stage.
Yeah.
There's a sense that you know what's funny versus what you think is funny. And so that's something that's lost too, is that what a comedian does is just them trying to find out what makes people laugh. Not them trying to express themselves. They are not writing their manifesto every time they get up on stage.
Right.
That being said, Hannah Gadsby's Nanette is extremely personal. Tig Notaro's Live is extremely personal. And that's the sort of stuff that's been connecting. So what's difficult for comedians who've always written based on what they know audiences think is funny is that now there isn't that disassociation that they can point to as like being their craft, because the comedy that's connecting is personal comedy. We want to laugh at something that you are telling us is very true about yourself. And there's just not really any room for exploration there, because if people expect that they're seeing you sharing your truth and then you say something that's offensive
or just ugly,
then that's your truth.
Yeah.
And you are now that person. And I don't know. I think maybe it's just the way it is now. And I'm not lamenting that. I'm not saying, oh, it's too bad that like Louis should be able to say the stuff he says about Parkland victims. I don't think that's true either. But so I know we're getting off the topic here, but I'm curious. Did you? This is not me defending Louis at all.
No, I did not hear it.
Did you hear it, or did you hear how Twitter said it?
I read an article about it.
Okay, I listened to the whole bit. The thing that struck me is it is exactly as people say. There's no sugarcoating it. And all I mean by putting it in context is when you hear Louis C.K. saying it, you realize this isn't like even him being angrier than he was before.
Yeah.
This is just him doing exactly what he always did.
Yeah.
He didn't change at all. And that's kind of what you're saying. We changed. I am 100% guaranteed that if the whole thing about him masturbating in front of women had never come out, we would have thought that Parkland thing was brilliant.
Yeah.
I know it. You listen to it, and I because I know we were both Louis C.K. fans.
Yes.
You know, he took it to that extreme, which we know he's always done, because there was the whole "of course, but maybe," which was that thing.
Yep.
And so when I saw it on Twitter, and I saw people getting so upset about this thing, and it sounded terrible when they were tweeting it, like who could possibly say that? And I was like, you know what?
You could pull any
Louis
of his
C.K.
stand-up,
is who would say that, and we always thought it was brilliant until now.
Yep.
I think you should listen to it, because it was a huge indictment to me.
Yeah.
Because now I'm going back and I'm looking at all that Louis C.K. said, and I'm saying, you know what? There's a lot of stuff he said that I really thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I kind of have to be like, but what, why was it brilliant?
Yep.
We didn't even think that way about him until his demons came out. It's almost different than Cosby, because Cosby's someone who kind of came out as saying like he was like America's dad, and he didn't even hide from that. He wanted to be a role model.
Yeah.
Louis C.K. never tried to be a role model.
Right.
And I'm not trying to defend him at all.
No,
but
I get it. I get it.
Like, I know we're way off topic.
We are. Well, I mean, but it's not so far off topic, because I think part of why we didn't like Step Brothers is because we've changed. The comedy world has changed, and Step Brothers just didn't. I mean, it's not that the Emperor had no clothes when Step Brothers came out, but it's just that it's not that great. It's not as great as we thought it was for a bunch of reasons, because people have done things with similar characters better. Those actors have done things with similar characters better. A lot of the shock value that was probably funny at the time is just crude now to us. I don't think it's the fault of the movie. The movie was a movie of 2008.
I also think that this is where we didn't even really talk much about McKay and his part in all this.
Yeah.
But to me, like, his other comedies said something. This doesn't say anything. And I actually, when you think about Anchorman, the stuff that it actually says by putting it in this sort of 70s kind of clueless chauvinism.
Yeah.
And what Anchorman's kind of saying is like, we're not that far removed from that. I mean, we don't think of Anchorman as being this brilliant like thesis,
right?
But it's there. If you want to look at it, it's there. Even Talladega Nights, being in that NASCAR fandom, that world, he says some interesting things about that sort of partnering of blind American patriotism to this gaudy American dream.
Ricky Bobby's version of what it means to be rich is gross.
Yeah.
So both those movies, as far as McKay's concept, are saying things.
Yeah.
And what can I say about Step Brothers? I actually tried to think of what Step Brothers could be saying.
In Knocked Up and 40-Year-Old Virgin, where somebody like was stuck, why they were stuck was more significant, and how they became unstuck, or in the case of 40-Year-Old Virgin, didn't become unstuck really, but like re-examined and was like, no, I did this.
They accepted it. Yeah.
I'm fine with who I am. I don't need to do what you guys are telling me.
The closest you get to any sort of like meaning in this movie is probably Richard Jenkins' speech about being a dinosaur or wanting to be a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Right?
The movie's about saying don't grow up.
Or don't lose that
Don't
part
ever-
of you.
yeah.
Don't lose that childish part of you.
Great.
But that childish part of you just wreaked havoc on, like,
Right,
it just
yeah.
made everybody miserable.
It just feels like there's very little thought to Step Brothers.
Mhm.
It was a formula that worked. It was two characters that they liked improvising with, and they created a movie around.
So what that produces is exactly what I think we've said. It's a quotable movie that's funny, and that's about where it ends.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's a 3-star movie.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I don't know. I guess yes. You're not going to change your rating.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was 4.
So you're going to bring it down.
Yeah.
Okay. We never even said what
On
your
the
star
rewatch?
rating within the rewatch was for
Oh,
you.
it
I just
was-
went
it was
with me,
3.
and then we
It was
jumped right
3.
into
was
it.
3.
Okay.
Yeah. We went all over the place here. We'll see what makes the cut, but
I'm gonna keep mine at 3. So I guess that.
yeah, I guess we're
best buds on that
one. Did we just become best friends?
Yup.
It's still funny.
Yeah, it's
Still
funny.
funny.
I think it's
very
funnier.
funny.
It's funnier when we do it.
It is than the people in the movie.
Yeah, I think so.
I predict you will hear those lines quoted, and they will be quoting us when they do it.
And when people quote it, they'll be like, "Oh, just so you know, this is
That was
not
from the podcast.
This is from this Can We Slip Friends. This is not the Step Brothers.
Not Step Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They may have did it first, but the podcast really took it to a new level.
Yeah. They made it their own.
All right, so let's talk about our next episode.
Yeah.
This is episode 70.
Coming up, yeah.
That's a milestone.
Yeah, it's a decade.
Yeah. And as far as like the 70s of American film, that's a great decade.
Yeah, definitely.
This is destined to be our best 10 episodes, I think.
Probably.
Or at least some of our more experimental and
out there. Yeah. A lot of unnecessary nudity on the upcoming episodes.
And I look forward to it.
And violence.
I look forward to it. Okay, so next episode, Ryan, have you seen Roma?
Yes, I have.
Me too.
Alfonso Cuarón's new movie on Netflix.
Yeah.
Great movie. Yeah.
Loved it. So far, my number 1 of 2018.
Wow.
So yeah, I guess I like.
And you saw Game Night. Wow. Okay.
I know. Huh. So with that said, Alfonso Cuarón. We kind of had it in our mind a little bit, and there were parts of Roma where I was like, you know what this reminds me of? A little bit.
Federico Fellini. Yeah.
And this is a very Fellini-esque movie.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, we should totally do Children of Men
in
our next episode.
And that's really
not really because of the Fellini thing.
No.
More because of Alfonso Cuarón
Nate's
directing.
not an especially linear thinker.
No.
Yeah.
This reminds me of this.
You of something.
Therefore, let's do...
Gonna pick a different movie by the same director. Yeah.
So we're going to do Children of Men,
Yeah.
which is also Alfonso Cuarón. Came out 2006, so it's been a while. I didn't think it was that old, actually.
Really?
No, it seems like it came out more recently than that, but...
It hasn't.
I haven't seen it since then.
I haven't either.
You haven't either.
I saw it in theater.
So I'm excited to watch this, and it's a movie that I think is really held in high regard by a lot of people, but didn't really get a lot of that level of credibility that Roma seems to be getting now.
No,
as far as
or even Gravity got.
Yeah, or even Y Tu Mamá También for that matter too. But Children of Men is to me where I think, at least within my friend group, this is the one that comes up the most often as far as influential movies, favorite movies of all time. Great cast, so always great to see.
Unbelievable cast.
For our listeners, this is super easy to watch Children of Men with us because it is
That's
streaming.
on Netflix, right?
It's on Netflix and it's on Crackle.
Oh,
so
gosh, dang.
if you don't even have a Netflix subscription, that's free.
That's crazy. Our Valentine's Day gift to you.
Yes. Yeah, that's
We're
true.
not
This is
doing
going
a
to
romantic
be
movie, and
and we have in the past. We'll find some romance in Children of Men. This one will go out to all the broken hearts.
Yep.
On Netflix and Crackle. Anyways,
they have no excuse then.
That's right. They don't have any excuse. And if you can think of an excuse, there's a couple ways you can let us know what your excuse is for not watching Children of Men. I'm gonna guess it has something to do with a lack of internet connection.
Which, thank you for using the limited internet you have to download and listen to our podcast.
Well, that's what I mean.
We appreciate that.
The excuse, I'm already shooting it down because I'm immediately going to ask back, how'd you listen to our podcast?
Sure. Wait, you can find a podcast app, but you can't find Crackle.
Right. So that excuse is out.
Come on.
But if you get creative and you can think of an excuse for why you can't stream Children of Men, you can send that over to us a couple different ways. We are on Twitter at CWSBF. We're on Facebook, Can We Still Be Friends podcast, not the movie from the Philippines. And you can send us an email, feedback at canwestillbefriends.net, which is our website, canwestillbefriends.net.
That's right.
Or we also have a phone number. Leave a message, 847-306-9532 is the number.
I just noticed the world of Children of Men is 2027.
Really?
Yeah.
Probably need to bump that up a little bit. You think?
Just a little sooner.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
You were off a little bit. 2021.
Yeah.
That'll be a lens to view this through. Man, we find a way to take joy. Step Brothers, a movie that's just fun, and then be like, you know what's not going to happen? Fun. We're not going to have fun.
We're not going to have fun. Yeah. We're not going to have fun. We're just going to dissect what fun is and what fun should be and what fun could be in the future.
Yeah. And why nothing's fun right now.
By the way, we're watching Children of Men.
Yeah.
For Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
All right.
So we will talk about Children of Men next time.
So join us.
Crackle it.
Yeah.
Oh, so the other night we crackled a couple episodes of Seinfeld.
You binge crackled?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, let's do it. All right.
It's not going to be January much longer.
Nope, that's right. All right. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next month when we're talking Children of Men.